Have you ever contemplated what truly drives a man from within? Beyond the urges, the unspoken choices, the words that remain unuttered, and even the most concealed fantasies. There exists a longing that virtually no man can articulate because he himself remains unaware of it. What's most striking is that even physical intimacy, which appears to dominate countless conversations, numerous pursuits, and endless frustrations, is not the genuine objective. It merely serves as a gateway, a disguise, an incomplete shortcut. Carl Jung, perhaps the greatest explorer of both masculine and feminine souls, perceives something that most men dare not acknowledge, that a man's deepest need is not physical. It's not biological, not carnal, but symbolic. It's the pursuit of integration, of wholeness, of meaning. And here our journey begins. In this exploration, you won't hear repetitive discourse. We won't rehash superficial speeches about how men constantly think about physical pleasure or how men are primarily visual beings. We're going to delve deeper, descending the steps of the soul one by one until we discover that silent and wounded part that beats within so many men, whether young or old, married or single, isolated or surrounded by people. Because deep down, even those who seem to have everything continue feeling that something is missing, a hunger that pleasure cannot satisfy, a thirst that physical release cannot resolve. Jung termed this missing element the anima. The anima represents the feminine aspect within the masculine unconscious. It's not an actual woman. It's the internal image of the feminine that every man carries within himself, shaped by his experiences, pain, deficiencies, rejections, and idealizations. When a man desperately seeks a woman, he's often not searching for her, but for the part of himself that he has lost. He doesn't realize it, but he's attempting to rescue his fragmented feminine soul. When this rescue remains unconscious, it transforms into an addiction to bodies, faces, conquests, because the man believes that only by possessing a woman can he feel complete. Yet the truth, and perhaps this is the deepest wound, is that he doesn't want a woman. He wants his own completeness. He wants to rediscover himself. He wants to return home, and he doesn't even know it. You might wonder, so is physical desire false? No, it's real, intense, vital, but it's also symbolic. When it's not understood this way, it becomes destructive, because the man begins living on the surface of pleasure, fleeing from the depth of genuine encounter. This condemns him to loneliness, even when accompanied, because every connection based solely on the flesh is doomed to decay with time. But why does this occur? Because from very early age, a man is taught to suppress everything that is sensitive, vulnerable, intuitive, emotional, everything that relates to the feminine. He learns to be strong, logical, invulnerable, and by rejecting the feminine outside himself, he also rejects it within. The anima becomes shadow, and everything that goes into shadow seeks revenge. That rejected part begins taking form in his dreams, in his unhealthy passions, in his relationships that oscillate between idealization and contempt. The man becomes tormented by an invisible woman within him who demands to be seen, felt, respected, but he doesn't know it. So, he seeks real women to try silencing that emptiness, and none succeeds, because no woman in the world can substitute for the wounded feminine within him. This is where frustration is born, the insatiable desire, the impression that none is sufficient, because what's missing isn't a partner, it's a piece of the soul. Jung said that every man needs to travel the path of the inner hero, and this path consists of conquering dragons in the exterior. It consists of confronting his internal monsters, his fears of surrendering, his anger toward the feminine, his trauma of rejection, his shame of crying, his need for control. It's in this confrontation that the man stops being merely a male and becomes a complete human being. That's where desire stops being only physical and becomes a bridge toward transformation. But how does this desire manifest in daily life? Observe a man who works excessively, who constantly needs to prove that he's capable, successful, conquering. Behind this often hides the desire to be loved unconditionally, to be welcomed, to be seen not for his performance, but for his essence. It's the desire of the inner child, still wounded, who tries to find in the world something he should have received in embrace and not in the office. Or consider that man who constantly changes partners, who cannot bond, who feels desire but withdraws after intimacy. He's not fleeing from women, he's fleeing from himself, from what they activate in him. Because every woman who touches him deeply also brings him closer to his own vulnerability. and this terrifies him. And there are still those who live in silence, in lukewarm marriages, in relationships where there's physical connection but no soul. They've settled. When the soul settles, it becomes sick, transforms into depression, chronic irritation, emptiness. These men often don't even know they're dying inside and need a mirror, an awakening. This exploration is that mirror. You who are listening to this now, perhaps you're tired. Perhaps you feel there's something within you that no one sees, that no woman understands, that you yourself cannot name, but you feel it in every night when everything seems lacking, in every caress that doesn't fulfill you, in every relationship that seems more like a contract than an encounter. Perhaps you're seeking the feminine outside because you've forgotten it lives within you. The great transformation occurs when a man stops projecting the feminine onto the women around him and begins integrating it within himself, when he recognizes his sensitivity as strength, his tenderness as wisdom, his emotion as compass. Then he no longer seeks women to fill a void. He chooses them to share fullness, to dance rather than to beg. It's at this moment that desire changes. It doesn't die, it refines itself. Touch becomes language, kiss becomes prayer, gaze becomes mirror. Intimacy stops being performance and becomes communion. And physical connection, it stops being a race toward climax and becomes a gateway to the sacred. Because when a man is complete, he doesn't penetrate a woman's body. He touches her soul, and that's the only form of pleasure that truly heals. That's why Jung spoke not only of physical intimacy, he spoke of eros, of creative impulse, of the force of union, of vital energy that moves the world, and that when misunderstood destroys, but when integrated transforms. Now, I invite you to reflect on what is the true desire that hides behind your desire. Are you seeking pleasure or encounter? Are you fleeing from pain or going toward meeting yourself? Have you ever truly loved someone or only tried to save yourself through someone? In the next part, we'll reveal how the absence of anima shapes men's most unconscious choices, from the type of woman they fall in love with to the repetitive failures in relationships. Prepare to see the invisible, to name the unspeakable, and who knows, to begin rescuing the most forgotten part of yourselves. Because the masculine soul, when it awakens, changes the world. There's a scene that repeats in the silence of adult life. A man standing before the mirror after shower, with the towel still over his shoulders, looking into his own eyes as if asking himself, "When did I lose myself?" But without making any sound, because there's no one left who can hear him, not even within himself. He no longer cries, not because he doesn't want to, but because he's forgotten how to do it. He's become hard, functional, punctual, a man who fulfills, who delivers, who sustains, but who no longer feels anything with intensity, only fragments. A bit of pleasure here, a bit of rage there, a bit of emptiness all the time. And physical intimacy, it has become a remedy for the broken soul and is no longer a rite of celebration with body and heart. This man can be 30, 50, or 65 years old. He can be in a decades-long marriage or in an endless sequence of attempts. He can have children or none. He can even be respected, admired, praised, but he knows. Deep down, he knows. Life has become too superficial for the depth he feels and can no longer name. And here's the truth that many avoid. When the anima is denied, the feminine part of the psyche, the man ages from within, even when he's still young on the outside. Because it's not time that tires us, it's disconnection. It's not age that hardens us, it's the fear of feeling. And this fear disguises itself well. It disguises itself in work, in jokes, in sarcasm, in elegant vices, in empty nights filled with unknown bodies, or in loneliness disguised as autonomy. Let's name what happens. The absence of anima in a man's inner life makes him prisoner of a constant search for feminine figures who make him feel complete, but he doesn't know it. So, unconsciously, he seeks the mother who didn't welcome him, the ex who abandoned him, the first love who marked him, the idealized woman who never existed. All of this projected onto the real women who pass through his life. And thus relationships become battlefields where he loves with fear, desires with guilt, clings with rage, and withdraws with shame. And he repeats. Think of Marcus, 41 years old, separated for 2 years, father of a child he sees every 2 weeks. He works in technology, spends 10 hours a day in front of the computer, eats what he can, and feels his life has become bland since he divorced. But actually, he had been absent much earlier. His marriage didn't end because his wife betrayed him, or because love ended. He ended from within, and when he ended, he stopped touching, stopped looking with presence, stopped listening. He began existing alongside, not together. And now he lives through applications, quick dates, repetitive conversations, and a constant desire for something that never arrives, because what he wants isn't outside, it's inside, hidden in the basement of the soul he locked decades ago. Or imagine Renato, 59 years old, a businessman, respected, with wealth, with influence, but who upon returning home is received by unbearable silence. He has a wife who accompanies him to social dinners, but there's no longer dialogue between them. They sleep in separate rooms, live on different planets, and Renato pretends everything is fine. He buys, travels, laughs, but inside him there's a child who wanted to be seen, a child who learned that crying is weakness, that feeling is waste of time, that being a man is being hard. And that child now cries silently in the early hours when he can't sleep because he feels, though he can't explain it, that something fundamental has been taken from him, and worst of all, he helped take it from himself. And then life empties, not of commitments, but of meaning. Disconnection from anima makes a man incapable of establishing healthy emotional bonds. He can be kind but cold. He can be physically active but emotionally absent. He can be a good father but never present. He can be a companion but never complete. Because the essential half of the soul, the one that knows how to welcome, listen, intuit, feel, and trust, was buried alive. And this absence isn't resolved with advice, with religion, with medications, with motivational books. It needs to be lived, looked in the eyes, welcomed like someone receiving a daughter who has been unjustly exiled, because that's what anima is. A daughter of the soul that the man rejected to survive, but that now needs to be rescued to truly live. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation, that is, of becoming who we really are, passes through reunion with anima, and this isn't done hastily. One must excavate personal history, look at one's own pain without masks, revisit the marking feminine figures of childhood, understand repeated emotional patterns, recognize the fear of surrender, the terror of rejection, the impulse of control, and all of this hurts, but it hurts because it's healing. Perhaps you now, listening to these words, have remembered a scene, a person, a forgotten sensation. Perhaps something in you is being moved, a memory, a regret, a desire to do things differently. That's a sign that anima is alive, though wounded, though silent, though hidden behind the armor you've put on to not be hurt again. But now perhaps it's time to remove it piece by piece with delicacy, with respect, with courage. And if this seems too difficult, I want to tell you something with open heart. You're not alone. No man has to travel this path without tools, without support, without guidance. This is why resources exist to help you begin this reunion with your soul. With brief exercises, accessible and transformative approaches, materials have been created so that each day you can take one more step toward your fullness and toward true love that only emerges from integration of everything that was once denied. Have you ever felt that you're living someone else's life? As if everything you've built, everything you've achieved, all the roles you play were a well-performed act, but without soul. This is the deep feeling that many men carry in silence. They don't say it aloud. Perhaps they don't even know how to express this feeling, but it manifests in long pauses at the wheel after an entire day of work, in that tiredness that goes beyond the body, in the gaze that always seems to search for something, but never finds. And in the mute question that resonates within, is this all? Jung warned us that modern man isn't sick from lack of pleasure, nor from lack of success. He's sick from emptiness, from loss of meaning, from exile from himself. And this exile has a name: disconnection from the soul. Now, imagine what happens when a man lives 30, 40, 60 years disconnected from his soul and still has success. He's admired, desired. What remains when one has everything and everything is still missing? What does one do when the world's applause no longer drowns the noise of one's own inner silence? Have you stopped to think that perhaps it's not your life that's wrong, but your direction? There's an almost invisible point in every man's trajectory where he has to make a decision, continue representing a role, or begin living with presence, continue seeking pleasure, or begin seeking truth. And this choice is never conscious. It occurs in details, in gazes that turn away, in sudden desire to isolate, in boredom that arises even amid comfort. It's the soul screaming, asking to return. But return where? To the center, to the origin, to the forgotten part that holds the keys to true inner freedom, consciousness of one's own psyche. Let's break a pattern here. Stop now. Close your eyes for a few seconds and try to remember, when was the last time you felt complete? Not just functional, complete, at peace with what you felt, with whom you were, with what you lived. Try to remember the sensation, the smell, the light of the environment, the temperature of the air. Did you manage it? If so, share in the comments how that scene was. Describe it. Perhaps your memory will help another man who is trying to find his now. Perhaps your contribution will be a map, and this space is for that, for exchange between souls that are awakening. The truth is that the man who ignores his symbolic and unconscious dimension becomes prisoner of invisible patterns. He repeats the same mistakes in different scenarios. He changes jobs, but remains unsatisfied. He changes partners, but remains alone. He changes cities, style, routine, but doesn't change inside, because the problem was never outside. It was always internal, psychic, archetypal. Carl Jung offered us a compass to understand these patterns, archetypes, universal truths that inhabit everyone's psyche, shaping our choices, impulses, passions, and resistances. Among the most powerful archetypes inhabiting man is that of the wounded lover. The wounded lover is one who desires intensely but fears surrender, one who seeks connection but sabotages the bond, who yearns for intimacy but hides in performance. And almost always this archetype activates in the lives of men who had their first emotional experiences marked by pain, rejection, abandonment, or repression. If you feel you never managed to maintain a healthy relationship, or if you live oscillating between fear of being invaded and panic of being abandoned, it's likely the wounded lover is guiding your decisions. The cure for this archetype isn't given with prefabricated formulas. It begins with consciousness, with truth, with courage to face one's own story without lies. And here's a question that might hurt. Who was the first woman who broke your trust? The answer might not be obvious. It could have been your absent or controlling mother. It could have been a teacher who humiliated you, a sister who ignored you, a first love who despised your surrender. But whoever it was, that figure left a mark on your unconscious, and that mark became a lens. All women who passed through your life after that were seen through that lens. This explains why so many men choose women who reject them, or women who need to be saved, or women who manipulate them. It's the psyche trying to repeat the pattern to see if this time it achieves a different ending, but the ending never changes while the pattern isn't exposed to the light of consciousness. Have you noticed how some men only fall in love with women who represent a challenge? It's not coincidence, it's the unconscious trying to relive the original drama. The difficult woman, the one who doesn't yield, the one who despises, activates something ancient, familiar, and the man surrenders not because he loves, but because he wants to fix something that broke decades ago. But no woman has the power to heal a wound she didn't cause, and expecting that from them is unfair to them, to you, to life. Now breathe deeply, because we're going to delve even deeper. Have you ever wondered why so many men, even in stable relationships, feel an almost uncontrollable impulse toward adventures, infidelities, flirtations, or inappropriate content? It's not lack of character, it's psychic disintegration. It's Eros energy trying to express itself somehow, anyhow, because it's been repressed, distorted, or projected for too long. Masculine desire, when not understood, becomes a hungry beast, but when understood and integrated, it becomes creative, vital, loving force. It's not just physical connection, it's life, it's art, it's the gaze that shines, the presence that enchants, the dance of the soul. The man who loses contact with Eros loses the grace of existing. That's why one of the most important questions a man can ask himself in 2025 is, what really makes me vibrate? If the answer is only money, status, pleasure, control, it's a sign you haven't yet found your spark, because true vibration emerges when you align with who you are, when your external choices reflect your internal truths, when you stop pretending. And now I want to invite you to deeper interaction. In the comments, say what you feel most prevents you today from living with fullness. Is it fear, routine, an old trauma, the feeling of not being enough, excess rationality? Right, not for others, but for yourself. Naming is the first step to transforming. Sometimes your phrase can open someone else's eyes, and sometimes what another person writes can be the answer you've been waiting for years. The community forming around this content consists of men and women seeking truth, depth, soul. Here, there are no judgments, only exchange. And if you've come this far, it's because something in you is ready to go beyond the surface. Because at some point, the man who has lived half his life fleeing from himself gets tired. He gets tired of running, of conquering, of hiding, and realizes that everything he's always sought, belonging, love, peace, freedom, begins when he accepts to descend the stairs of the soul and meet himself in the dark mirror of the unconscious. This encounter is the beginning of everything. There's a silent study that no one reports in newspapers, a statistic hidden by the noise of productivity and success. According to the World Health Organization, men represent almost 80% of global instances of self-harm. You read correctly, 80%. Almost all of them with apparently functional lives, with work, family, home, many with friends, some even with fame. But the question no one dares ask is, why do they take their lives when in the world's eyes they seem to be at the peak? The answer is terrifying and deeply symbolic, because they had already died inside long ago and no one noticed. Society demands that men be strong, resilient, discreet, feel little, not cry, not weaken, and they learn. They also learn to bury all their sensitivity, all their fragility, all their desire for affection, to be heard, for refuge. They substitute it with performance, work, physical pleasure, silence. But one day the body can't take it anymore. The mind can't take it anymore. The soul screams. And if the scream doesn't find a space to be welcomed, it becomes death. That's the dimension of the whole we're talking about. And that's why we need to descend one more step. Imagine a man named Daniel. He's 52 years old. He's an executive at a multinational. He lives in a penthouse with ocean views. He travels frequently. He wears a Swiss watch of exorbitant value on his wrist and has a collection of expensive wines in the cellar. But every night, after having 2 glasses, he sits on the terrace and wonders if any of this matters. He misses something he's never lived, a type of love he can't name, a connection he's never had, neither with the woman sleeping in the next room, nor with his children who barely seek him, and much less with himself. Daniel has never betrayed his wife, never abandoned his children, but he's betrayed himself, abandoned his soul, and now, though surrounded by achievements, he lives a grief that has no name, grief for the life he could have lived and didn't live out. Of fear. That fear isn't visible. It's fear that hides behind control, behind jokes, behind sarcasm. Fear of being seen, touched, discovered in his rawest essence. Because deep down, he believes that if someone saw his true self, they would leave. This is more common than you imagine. According to Harvard University research that followed 724 men for 75 years, the longest study in history about happiness, the conclusion was clear. Deep relationships and quality of emotional bonds are the main factor of well-being and longevity. More than money, more than fame, more than professional success. But here's the irony. Most men we know don't know how to bond emotionally. They know how to maintain, protect, resolve, but they don't know how to open up, surrender, show themselves, because they were never taught. On the contrary, it was taken from them. This brings us to even more alarming data. 1 in 4 adult men today claims to have no intimate friends, none, not a single human being with whom to share their rawest pain, their darkest thought, their most childish fear, and that alone is already a state of emotional emergency. But how did we get here? The origin is in childhood. All children are born sensitive, with easy tears, with curious eyes, with desire to be held. But at some point, this is interrupted. When he cries, someone tells him, "Swallow that cry." Men don't cry. When he's scared, someone tells him, "Be brave, don't be afraid." When he wants to be held, someone tells him, "You're too spoiled." And there, in that apparently harmless phrase, a part of the child is amputated, and he understands. To be accepted, I have to be less me. That less me becomes performance, armor, shell, and that shell hardens so much that one day he forgets who he was. And when someone tries to love him, he's not capable of receiving it, because love requires vulnerability, and he's lost the way back to it. Do you know any man like this? Or better yet, do you recognize this in yourself? Write in the comments if you wish. What was the first time you felt you could no longer be sensitive, that you had to pretend to be strong, that you understood that to survive, you would have to silence your soul? Your story can move another man now. It can free something that's been trapped for decades. Returning to Jung, there's a fundamental point that must be noted. The man who denies the feminine within himself condemns himself to solitude. He can have partners, he can even have a wife, but he will never experience the fusion that emerges from communion of souls, because the feminine is the bridge. It's what allows welcoming, listening, feeling together. And if this seems abstract to you, here's a concrete image. Imagine two bodies lying side by side. The light is off. They've touched, pleasure has come and gone, but the silence that remains between them is uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. There's no exchange, no truth, no presence. Only tired bodies trying to represent a ritual that has lost its soul. That's what the physical connection of many men becomes after 40, 50, 60 years. Mechanical, superficial, solitary, even in company, because intimacy disconnected from the heart becomes anesthesia and not communion. And what to say of men who no longer feel any desire? It's the soul's last cry before giving up. When even eros is silenced, it's a sign that the soul can no longer bear the disconnection. One must act, look inward, seek help, open the chest, scream if necessary, but not be silent anymore. And pay attention to this. The inner feminine is not weakness. It's not an invitation to passivity. On the contrary, when a man integrates his feminine part, he becomes even more potent because he no longer acts from lack, but from truth. He doesn't seduce to compensate, but to express himself. He doesn't fight to dominate, but to protect. He becomes complete, and a complete man is a force of nature. There's a term Jung used frequently, conjunctio, the union of opposites, the fusion between masculine and feminine within being. And this union isn't an event, it's a process, a path, a journey that requires courage, presence, and humility. And that's why many give up halfway, because meeting oneself is the most terrifying act that exists. Not because we're monsters, but because we're too vast. And dealing with that vastness is frightening. But you know what's even more frightening? Reaching life's end and realizing you never were who you are. If this thought provokes a knot in your throat, a chill, a dull pain in your chest, perhaps it's time to listen, not to the world, but to the soul, to that low voice you learned to silence, that now returns subtle but firm, saying, "Come back. Look. At me, I'm still here. And that, my brother, is the beginning of freedom." Perhaps our generation's greatest mistake was believing that maturing is the same as hardening, that becoming a man is stopping feeling, that being strong is staying silent, and above all, that love can be lived without depth, that it's enough to function, move forward, fulfill what's agreed. But now, in the mature silence of your 35, 45, 60 years, you've already understood. What really matters isn't what others see. It's what you feel when no one else is looking. Everything we've said so far brings us to a crossroads, a turning point, a fine line between continuing to survive or finally beginning to live. And living in this case isn't doing more. It's doing things differently. It's moving with presence. It's above all integrating what has been denied. Because what makes modern man sick isn't the external world. It's the unresolved conflict within him. For years, you've been pushed toward a caricature of masculinity, rational, direct, practical, invulnerable. Perhaps you learned it as a child when you were scolded for feeling too much, or in adolescence when you learned your value depended on your performance, or as an adult when you discovered the world rewards those who stay silent and punishes those who expose their soul. But today you realize the soul that was repressed never left. It just waited. It waited for space, waited for time, waited for opportunity, and now it whispers like one imploring freedom. At this point in the narrative, you might wonder, what do I do with all this? How do I deal with this ancient pain that has returned to beat, with this hunger for truth that cannot be satisfied, with this desire to be who I am, but without knowing where to start? The answer begins with a simple but radical gesture. Stop fleeing. Look at yourself in the mirror with honesty. Recognize what you've left behind, what you've silenced, what you've denied. Because only when you name your pain can it stop being a prison and become a path. Let's review everything that has brought us here. You've discovered that men's desire isn't actually the other's body, but their own return to their center. that physical intimacy is a symbol, not an end. That the need for pleasure hides a deeper absence, the absence of soul, of the inner feminine. You've understood that repeating emotional patterns isn't bad luck or destiny, but unconscious psychodynamics, that every impulse toward control, seduction, distancing, or dependence emerges from unhealed wounds, silent traumas, emotional scripts you've memorized without realizing. You've seen that many men die in their soul before even becoming physically ill. That masculine silence isn't quietude, it's a scream. That absence of bonds isn't autonomy, it's exile. And above all, you've recognized there's a part of you that needs to be rescued. The lost arrows, forgotten tenderness, real presence, the part that desires to love with truth, live with depth, and stop performing to finally be. So, now faced with all this, what remains? Choice remains, and that choice isn't grandiose. It's not made at the top of a mountain, nor does it require abandoning everything and starting over. It begins in almost invisible details, in how you respond when you feel fear, in how you look at your partner or their absence, in the time you dedicate to inner silence, in willingness to listen and not just speak, in courage to be moved by a scene, a memory, an embrace. Because the man who returns to himself doesn't need to be perfect. He just needs to be honest. Perhaps it's time to call that friend and say, I need to talk, but really talk. Perhaps it's time to tell your partner, I never knew how to show myself, but I'm ready to try. Perhaps it's time to look at yourself in the mirror, and for the first time recognize yourself, not for what you've conquered, but for everything you've survived within yourself, even after years of repression. And yes, this path hurts because moving the soul requires excavating memories, reviewing decisions, rediscovering who we were. And that can break some certainties, cool some bonds, change some paths. But it can also return brightness to the gaze, fire to touch, poetry to life. You deserve more than a lukewarm marriage, more than empty nights, more than meaningless repetitions. You deserve a life with soul, and if you've come this far, something in you already knows it. Now, if you want to put all this into practice with clear, deep, and realistic steps, applying them to your personal life, your daily emotional existence, and even your relationships, then prepare to immerse yourself in the strategic plan that awaits. A practical and transformative step-by-step, to integrate everything said so far and convert knowledge into lived reality. An intense and necessary journey that begins with the simple gesture of looking inward and asking yourself, is there something alive in me that needs to flourish? Are you ready for it? Then come with me. Let's go together. What would you do if you knew with complete certainty that there's a forgotten part of yourself waiting to be rediscovered? And if that part weren't lost in the future, in some distant goal, nor in others, nor in what the world expects of you, but hidden within, sleeping, wanting to be heard. Everything we've explored in this content so far hasn't been just philosophical or psychological reflection. It's been a call, a rescue, a silent journey back to your soul. And now the most important moment has arrived, transforming this consciousness into action. Because knowing isn't the same as living. Understanding isn't the same as transforming. Many see, few traverse. But if you're here, it's because something in you wants to go further. You don't just want to comprehend what Jung revealed, but feel it, incorporate it, and then live it. That's why now I'm going to give you a plan, a practical, emotional, and symbolic step-by-step to apply everything we've discussed in this exploration to your life and make this journey something real, daily, intimate. A plan that isn't perfect or quick, but is deeply true and can be initiated by any man of any age who's willing to stop surviving and begin living with soul. Stage 1. Revealing silence. Before changing anything external, you must listen to your interior. Dedicate 5 minutes daily to silence. Without phone, without music, without distractions. Just you and your body, you and your breathing, you and your soul. It can be first thing in the morning or at day's end, but it has to be an inviolable space. In that moment, just ask yourself, how am I really? And listen to the response. It won't come in word form, but as sensations. And that's already the beginning of reconnection. Step 2. The soul's journal. Take a notebook that's yours alone. In it, write every day one blank page, without censorship, without logic, just what comes to you. Fears, rage, desires, confessions, doubts. This practice isn't about obtaining answers, but allowing your soul to speak. And believe it, it has much to say. Many of the answers you seek in others are hidden inside, but you need to give yourself voice to hear them. Step 3. Relive your past with compassion. Choose a memorable moment from your childhood or adolescence, an episode you always avoid remembering, and this time look at it with more benevolent eyes. Imagine yourself as that child. What did he feel? What did he need? What didn't he receive? Now write him a letter, tell him everything he needed to hear and didn't hear. That letter isn't just symbolic, it's a healing bond, because while you reject your past, you'll be denying living parts of yourself. Step 4. Observe your emotional repetitions. Make an honest list of patterns that repeat in your life. They can be in relationships, losses, failures, impulsive decisions. Don't judge, just observe. Ask yourself, what are all these repetitions trying to show me? Jung said, what isn't brought to consciousness repeats as destiny. This exercise is the beginning of the end of unconscious repetition. When you see clearly, you begin to have choice. Step 5. Integrate your rejected part. Every man carries within himself a wounded feminine part, a sensitive part that's been silenced, an intuition that's been ignored, a tenderness that's been repressed. Now is the moment to recover it. How? By allowing yourself to feel, crying if you need to, saying I don't know with humility, listening without interrupting, accepting your sadness without needing to disguise it with humor or anger. This integration doesn't happen at once, but begins with the simplest gesture. Stop fleeing from your truth. Stage 6. Cultivate bonds with presence. Speak with someone sincerely, without script, without protecting yourself with sarcasm or rationalization. It can be a friend, a partner, a therapist. Say something you never dared to say. Show something of yourself that almost no one knows. Intimacy only emerges when the mask falls, and you'll be surprised what can flourish when someone sees you as you are and stays. Step 7. Live love with soul. If you're in a relationship, begin perceiving the difference between habit and presence. Exchanging words isn't the same as connecting. Having physical intimacy isn't the same as surrendering. Ask yourself, am I here in body and soul? And if not, return gradually with gestures, gazes, sincere words. If you're not in a relationship, realize how you've sought love, with fear or openness, with control or surrender. Correcting course now can change your destiny. Step 8. Practice the sacred in everyday life. Jung said, a life without symbolism is a dry life. Bring the sacred to your days. Light a candle before sleeping. Listen to music that moves you deeply. Meditate on impermanence while observing the sky. Talk to your soul like someone speaking with an old friend. These small gestures have the power to re-enchant existence. Step 9. Reconcile with your shadow. Everything you reject in yourself, your jealousy, your envy, your lack, your vanity, is part of your humanity. Don't heal yourself trying to be perfect. Heal yourself by accepting yourself completely. When shadow is integrated, it stops being enemy and becomes ally. It gives you strength, authenticity, and freedom. Step 10. Choose integrity every day. Healing isn't an endpoint, it's a continuous choice. In every decision, in every relationship, in every thought, ask yourself, does this choice fragment me or integrate me? Then follow the path that leads you back home to yourself. If all this has resonated with you, if something within you has moved, been excited, been ignited, perhaps now is the moment to deepen this reunion. And for this, I want to recommend with affection something that was born precisely to be a companion on this journey. Resources have been created for men and women who feel their soul asks to reconnect, but don't know where to begin. With simple and symbolic practices inspired directly by Jungian psychology principles, these materials guide you accessibly to recover life's depth, even amid daily chaos. And if you've felt this content is true, I invite you to explore it with open heart. It can be the first concrete step for everything felt here to become real transformation. And before you go, I ask for a gesture that can amplify this message. If you found value in this exploration, consider sharing your experience. And if you feel it, share in the comments, even anonymously, some experience of yours, a feeling, a doubt, a pain. This space exists so you no longer have to walk alone. Because when a man awakens, he doesn't just transform his own life, he transforms everything around him. And the world needs this now. It needs integral men, living souls. It needs you.